Hello, and welcome to the A Way to Live Well podcast. I'm Anna Maria, your host. On this show, you will hear heartfelt stories of growth and transformation. I speak with people who use their experiences to build community, to cultivate connection, to create a positive impact on the world and society. I created this show as a place from which you could draw new insight, fresh energy and inspiration to help you wherever you might be along your journey. There is something so wonderful about being in the company of somebody who is completely at ease with who they are. It inspires you to feel completely comfortable and at ease with who you are. My guest today is Nick Higgins. He is a yoga teacher and yoga teacher trainer, co-founder of the third fastest growing yoga business in the world, Hotpod Yoga. Hotpod Yoga is an immersive experience where you enter into a heated pod. The space is kind of dark, lit with some funky lighting. The music is up-tempo, and it gives you this feeling of being just really immersed in the experience. On this week's episode, Nick shares with us his journey, how himself and his partner and friend Max came to develop the Hotpod, ups and downs of the business, and what inspired their unique brand of yoga. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Hey Nick Higgins, how's it going? So brilliant to have you on the show today. I'm really thrilled and honored that you would take the time to come and speak with me.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Did you know that your name, your surname, has some Irish roots?
I did, yes.
Did you? Okay, cool.
I don't exactly know what roots they are, but my dad goes on about it. Right. And it was actually originally it's like there was an O before the Higgins, so it was O Higgins.
Yes, exactly.
And he's very adamant he wants to kind of bring it back.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So tell me, where are you? What are you doing? What's your evening looking like?
I have just arrived back in my flat in King's Cross, and I have just put down my computer because I will probably, after speaking to you, there's some things I need to catch up on, and so I'll probably do another bit of hours work, and then chill out.
How did you arrive to the place you are at today in terms of what do you think the building blocks are that sort of created the way you are in the world?
Before I got to where I am right this very moment, I was basically, in terms of my career as such, I was like, I was working at a nursery school as like a teaching assistant, and I basically fell into that because a friend of mine was like, I think you'd be really good at teaching, and it's incredible, so why don't you come along and try it out? And I was like, I would really love to try that. And I basically worked there for 2 years, and to be honest, it was the most eye-opening experience I've ever had in my life, because it taught me more about myself than anything else I've ever done, because you're working with just little pure beings who are just so open to learning and just kind of pure fun and pure joy. But you have to, what I realized is that it was incredibly challenging to communicate and to get across points and learnings, and then also you manage your own emotions, because you've got a crowd of 10 to 15 3 or 4 year olds screaming at you. You've got to, you just had to like learn how to kind of manage that in some way. And so I suppose that was kind of like, there's no kind of bullshit around it. And you really and what really taught me was just to be yourself. And that basically, I think, cemented quite a lot of foundations with my own personality and taught me a huge amount about myself. And it was at the same time I was basically falling in love with yoga, and I was going day in, day out, just practicing it.
How did that come about? How did you discover yoga? Did somebody sort of bring you to a class, or did you just hear about it, or?
So I suffered kind of like from poor knees, bad back, and like I think at the age of 20, things were clicking all the time. It was just getting really frustrating. And I've been to see people like osteopaths and chiropractors, and they did wonders, but it only felt good for like a day or two, and ultimately like the healing has to like come within, rather than somebody else being able to do it for you. And so I then heard yoga was good, and I was like, right, I'm going to try some yoga out. And I basically went to some classes around me where I was living at the time in London, and I like, in all honesty, just because of where I was, probably in my mindset, I didn't really get it. I was like, what? Like, I know this is going to be good, but I think, I don't know, it's maybe just a step too far. Not in the sense of like the teachers were probably wonderful, but like, I didn't really grasp the idea of like perhaps the language being used or the movements, and maybe from when I was young, I used to like competitive nature. So like the whole element of solo individual movement, maybe I just wasn't really grasping. But either way, it wasn't really clicking. And so I kept on going to different classes. I was trying out different classes, did some Ashtanga, did some Kundalini, did some, some stuff, which is what I love it now. But back then I was kind of like, I'm struggling to grasp it. And so then a friend of mine was like, you should come and try out Bikram. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but yeah, I'll come and try it out. And his exact words were, it's the only thing that gives me a six pack. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll come and try it out. And then, so I went and did it, and it was the most intense hour and a half of my life. I would probably say it was like hell, probably. But it was the first time that I came out of something, and I'd never felt that good, ever. I was like, that is absolutely incredible. And so basically that sparked it. I was like, however difficult the challenge was of that whole process of that hour and a half, it was that sensation and feeling that you get to at the end. I was like, right. So I just carried on going to Bikram. But the trouble was, at the time, I was like, it was a long way away from me. It was then, by being a long way away, it would take, rather than just an hour and a half of the class, it takes up really 3 hours of your evening or morning, and then you're sweating for another 2 hours after that. So it was basically half a day's work. And so it became very, very challenging. And then eventually I kind of paused it. But at the same time, then I think a month or so later, there's a studio called Yoga Haven, which opened up in Clapham. And they've got quite a few studios around about the place in London and across the UK. And I basically fell in love with it. It was kind of like it incorporated the heat, but also the different practices as well. And like the teachers there, the girls who owned it were just like, it was amazing. It was like, this is wicked. And I basically just kept on going. And I went like every day, maybe twice a day. And then from there, I basically then, it was two years or so later that I basically, as I was doing it, the guys were like, why don't you think about doing a teacher training? I was like, and I never really thought about taking it seriously, but I thought I'd like to kind of discover a little bit more. Yeah. And so then I did that teacher training, and then it was kind of like, once I'd done the teacher training, obviously you go even deeper into it. And then I basically started teaching kind of part-time, just on the weekends, as well as then just whilst I was working at the school as a teacher too. And that then, the momentum kind of picked up, and I started teaching it more and more and more. And then eventually I stopped teaching at the school altogether. And basically that kind of like hops over to how we started Hotpod Yoga. So basically my friend Max, who I went to school with, and I also went to university with, and also went traveling with, he basically saw me at the time like doing yoga, and his kind of observation of that was like, he was very worried for why I was doing yoga, because he saw yoga as something which, maybe females do, and
Right.
or maybe you do it over in India, or maybe you do it in the Himalayas or something like that. So his preconception of it was something completely different. And he, like, by seeing me and obviously being close to me, he was kind of quite concerned. But I was like, honestly, man, this is the best thing you will ever do in your life. And he was like, sure, of course it is. So then I was like, I promise you, this is, it's incredible. And then when I started doing my teacher training, he was even more concerned by it, like, as a career. And I was like, honestly, this is, it's incredible. Anyway, so
how
I
did
managed
that
to
conversation go when you were trying to like convince him that you wanted to start it?
Basically, whenever I try and convince him of anything, he like laughs at me, and eventually he just comes and does it. Like, it's similar to my shoe wear. So if I wear Viva Barefoot, he just like laughs me out the door. But I know eventually he'll start wearing them. So it's just a matter of time. I can't like force it upon him.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I'll come and do it. And eventually he I said, go try some yoga. So he basically went to some classes around him. He kind of had the same experience as I did. He was kind of like, he tried some stuff out which he found quite bizarre, in all honesty, even though it's just a lack of understanding, really. And then he came back to me and was like, honestly, what's like this yoga thing? What like I'm still bemused by it. And then I was like, then I said, okay, well, why don't you just come to one of my classes where I'm teaching at? And eventually he came to one of the classes. I think I was teaching at Yoga Haven at the time, and did the class, and he was wriggling like a fish. It was very hot in there too. But at the end of the class, when we sat down and just had a little chat about it all, he said, I understand completely what you mean. Like, I feel absolutely unbelievable.
Okay. So
and it wasn't the fact that it was me teaching, probably, because I was very fresh into teaching, but I think it was just the encompassment of perhaps the different movements, perhaps the way, different explanations, and also the heat as well.
well,
and
also
in the studio.
probably your approach, and he probably felt comfortable in that kind of way of doing it, right? Or
I hope so. Yeah. He may. I hope. Yeah, I hope. I think it probably definitely would. If you know somebody and you feel comfortable with them already, then you're probably going to feel more held.
Yeah,
in some
absolutely.
way. So and then basically that's why that's how it all started. I kind of got him into it, and then he started falling in love with it. And then eventually we, half a year went by, and we basically sat back down. And we were like, why is it that we both came to those same conclusions? Why is it that without that persistence and in doing different classes, and without that persistence, we probably would have stopped at the first hurdle, without the realization that this thing is so incredible and it makes you feel so amazing. We basically looked at it, and we saw there's kind of like a number of different aspects. One is the fact that, I think preconceptions of yoga, and I think still held by many, if not the majority, of like, you do have to be a certain body type, you might have to be in a certain kind of, in the fitness industry, and certainly even now because it's become more glamorous and such. And I think also, certainly from males looking into a predominantly female-orientated kind of setup, it can be quite putting off.
Yeah.
So that was one. And I think, also, like, it was the lack of understanding. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes with yoga, which if you're not kind of familiar with it, be it the language, be it like the movements, be it like even the breathing, it can be quite a foreign concept. And so actually, like, it can kind of almost put people off. And that, as such, like, that's basically what we sat down. We were like, we want to be able to change that. Ultimately, we want to be able to, if my friends still look at us and still think, well, what on earth, what are they doing? Like, that's what we want to change. We want to be able
Yeah.
to allow people to come and try the stuff, open the door for it, fall in love with it, and just have a little bit of it in their lives. And that's kind of how we started why we started Hotpod Yoga. And how we go about doing that is, and where I suppose I am today, coming all the way back to your original question, is we have these particular pods which we've designed to create an environment which is dark, warm, immersive, so that if you're a new person, you can step in and feel completely at ease. You don't almost feel as though, people are looking at you, even though nobody ever is anyway. But to help kind of that sense of feeling calm, you have the warmth and there's obviously to get the body so that it's not, it can limber up, so it helps newer, fresher people kind of move a little bit easier. But also that the heat just increases that feeling of release. And then I suppose from a teaching perspective, like what we try and do is just try and make everything clear, simple, and everything is super understandable, so that if you walk in your first class, you walk out saying, I understood everything what was said there, and I feel amazing, rather than I didn't really feel held and I didn't really know what was being spoken about, etc.
You have a really beautiful kind of community that has grown around the Hotpod brand, and it's like this Hotpod family, I think I presume that's completely intentional, and that idea of being inclusive rather than exclusive really lends itself to that. Can you say a little bit about what community means to you and how the Hotpod community has impacted your life?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the teachers that we work with, inherently, it's through them and how they do so amazingly well, and like building the relationships between the students, and just creating an atmosphere that it basically is just so all inclusive. I suppose it's one of the reasons why, we never really wanted like the relationship between the students and the teachers to be super strong, so that you can create that community. And in a way, that's why we don't really have receptionists. Everyone kind of pre-books anyway, so it's quite streamlined in that sense. But I think that by doing that, by like actually having that real kind of humane feel and like the ability to like communicate between student and teacher, I think like that just builds that relationship and rapport massively. And then it just, you can basically as teachers, we can start to understand the students much better and help them get to maybe where they want to get to, if there is anything, or just generally being able to hold them a bit more. And the students, therefore, just tend to be able to like have a place to come to where they can start to integrate more into the community. I think certainly in London anyway. So it's challenging because everyone's zooming in and out. And I think by having that kind of space where it is just real one-to-one interaction with student and teacher, I think that basically helps the community grow much more, and you just start to meet people in and around the space, etc.
You're also really quite considerate when it comes to the environment. I know you're taking a lot of measures in order to ensure that like things are like recycled, and I know you do a whole other bunch of like little things that maybe people don't even notice within the studio, just to help sort of reduce waste, and like your things like your aluminium water cans and just other things like that. Why is that an important issue to your company and you yourself?
Well, I think like the planet needs it, one.
For sure.
Two, I think it's very easy just to it's just being like conscious, really. I think like if we can strive to become better and like reduce as much just unnecessary waste as possible, it's just fundamentally firstly it's better for the environment, and also just allows us to be much more kind of conscientious and aware of the whole process. I think like it stems from the heat and the electricity. Like it's very, very little electricity, and I think like that's down to kind of the design of the pods and also the way that the heaters that we use. But I think also like when you're doing in studios as well, there's a lot of people coming through, and there's a lot of potential wastage that happens, and it's like, how can we just distill that as best as possible? And like you said, yeah, like aluminium cans, recycling aluminium cans, the wipes as well, like to be eco-friendly with those. But basically, yeah, we're always striving to be best as we can be in is reducing as much waste as possible, basically.
What has been your most challenging moment, either as a teacher or as a business owner? And what have you learned from it? How have you grown?
I used to be terrified of speaking in public. Like,
okay.
It was absolutely terrifying. And now I really enjoy it. And that's because I pushed myself through the fear of standing up and talking in front of people when teaching. And it wasn't like a sudden thing. It just basically, like, I think after about 7 years, and that feeling kind of dissipates.
Yeah.
So I think that was certainly my main challenge in terms of being as a teacher.
Yeah, that's a good one, and it's really hard for a lot of people. What is the best moment you can think of of your experience as a teacher or as a business owner? Most memorable.
Well, I think probably like the first inflation of a pod. That was certainly very, very, very memorable. But then I think also the launch of our first studio in Hackney. I think that was
cool.
That was certainly one. And then there was also like one which kind of we also did a little pilot of this, which was like an outdoor pod which sat on the rooftop of. But there was one, yeah, it was like an outdoor pod which we did up there, which was very memorable in the summer. Come the winter, I wanted to forget about it.
Nice.
But no, it's cool.
So Hotpod is also offering teacher trainings, which is really exciting. You've been doing it for a few years now, but from what I understand, what do you think makes a good teacher?
To be themselves, number one. I think the danger is to put on a persona, and actually really what we're trying to do, what everyone is trying to eke out, is to basically just try and be yourself, standing up in front. And I know that's an easier thing said than done, and that just comes down to practice. But I think ultimately, for me, really, it's just like, is how can as when leading teacher training, how can we get you to be yourself? And that, for me, is the most important thing.
So you live in London. It's super busy. Everything is always on. Everything's always going. How do you create balance in that kind of space?
Mm-hmm. With difficulty. You've really got to work at trying to find the balance. I mean, it's always in flux, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I would love to say to you that, I have a perfect morning routine, and I work 6 hours and then come back to the evening routine and in bed by 9-10. But it's just like, I think it's in flux, and I think as long as I get to practice once a day, and as long as I'm eating right, and as long as I do have like a decent morning routine, and as long as I'm not getting to bed too late, then I find that is good enough balance. I think the one that I do have to work more towards is being more social. So seeing friends and family. Otherwise, I can get too wrapped up within work. I think planning is something which I've really had to become much, much better at. That is how I create more balance, by planning it.
So the name of the show is A Way to Live Well.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to you to live well?
Moving, as in movement, as in exercise, eating decently and enough, sleeping enough, and seeing friends and family enough. That, for me, is how I feel I'm living well. I'm doing those things.
Getting enough. I love it.
Yeah.
So I guess my next question would be, what is in store for either you personally in terms of the business or the business as a whole? Where do you see it going? What are your hopes and dreams?
Well, I think we're only like scratching the surface, really. I think like if we want to be able to achieve by like what we're setting out to do, like being able to give this to the majority who don't do this already, as in like allowing people to feel as good as they can possibly be, then we've strides ahead of us, really. And I think like the further ability to kind of provide more opportunity for people to get to pods across the world really is kind of the next stage, and how we kind of ensure we can kind of help with that. But yeah, I suppose it's the more focus on like the I suppose pods opening, and also because we have like it's a franchise model too. So we work with other yoga instructors outside of London who want to kind of own their own space, own their own pod and studio, and that's what we wanted to kind of bridge as well. So being able to kind of help people who might find it a struggle to kind of make a living in, you know, small towns, villages in and around the UK and the world. Like, what we want to be able to do is try and provide them like a business opportunity too. So it's also kind of moving forward with that in like a very focused way over the next few years too. The teacher trainings, and then the kind of the more trainings to be able to provide for that is kind of the next stages of it too. Yeah, there's lots more we want to do in terms of like the music that we use and all the other kind of the subtler areas. But yeah, just really kind of pushing forward with all of those streams, really.
Bringing yoga to everyone.
That's it. Yeah.
Very cool. So if anybody wants to connect with you or maybe follow you on social media or find out where their local pod is, could you give us some details?
Yes, so you can go onto the website, which is hotpodyoga.com, and that will kind of should use like a little location tracker to find your nearest pod. Alternatively, on all the social channels, Instagram, Facebook, there's Hotpod Yoga, and it will be kind of location based too. Personally, I'm not on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that. Just because I find that I can get too distracted by it. So I'd love to be able to say like, oh, and I only look at my phone from this time to this time. I mean, I'm looking at my phone a lot of the time. But so I try and avoid looking at it even more by social being there. But yeah, the hotpodyoga.com and Hotpod Yoga Instagrams are the best places to find me, really.
That is brilliant. And you also teach classes around London as well, right? So
that is correct, yeah. Tuesday morning, 6:30 in Belgravia.
Amazing. Brilliant. Nick, I know you have loads to be getting back to. You're super busy. I really just want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat to me and tell us about your journey and everything. It's been great.
Thank you very much indeed. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
Have a really lovely afternoon or evening.
You too.
I would just like to say thank you very much to you, the listener, for taking the time to listen to this episode. If you'd like to find out more about Hotpod Yoga, where you can practice, you can go online to hotpodyoga.com. You can also follow them on Instagram. I know they have a studio in Dublin for any of my listeners in Ireland, and you can go check that one out. If you would like to get in contact with me, I love to hear feedback or comments, or maybe you have somebody in mind that you'd like me to interview on the show. You can drop me a message on my Gmail, awaytolivewell@gmail.com. I'm also on Instagram, so you can keep up to date on latest podcast releases. Wishing you a wonderful evening. Be well.